So my mom does AA, and
Okay.
I don't know. I like as soon as she started, I was like, that is a cult. I'm getting really strong cult vibes from that. Like, no thanks,
Yeah.
mom. But then but
Yeah.
then that kind of like wrapped up with her faith, and she became a more loving person. And I was like, well, looks like a cult to me,
Mm.
but
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's definitely valuable for her. And then um whatever, like, I don't know, who am I to judge,
Yeah.
right? So I don't know how it works.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about AA. I know that it's helped a lot of
Yeah.
people.
Okay.
I've had some other people on my
Yeah.
podcast, and it's completely transformed their lives too. Going
Yeah.
back to what you were saying about works,
Mhm.
so I think we're in agreement from like the limited time I've spent reading and studying these things and talking to other people about it. I'm in agreement. It's a weird thing to say that you could be saved regardless of works, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
But I
Counterintuitive.
think,
Yeah.
yeah, it is counterintuitive, but I think
Mhm.
it also, it's like relaxing. It gives you a level of ease that maybe
Yeah.
allows you to be good, right? Because
Yes.
you're not
Yes.
doing it, it's not good, and resentful people experience this. It's not good to do things for somebody else because you think you have to. That's not good.
Yes.
Even if you
Yes.
end up doing
Yeah.
doing like good things, if you're doing them to stop someone from being angry, or because you feel guilty, or because you think you have to, you're just going to end up resentful. It's not going to be good for
Yes.
anyone. You're going to end up overdoing it for people. You're not going to have the proper boundaries. I used to be like that, and I used to feel,
Yeah.
I think because I was sick too, I felt guilty all the time. So I was always trying to help more than I should help. And I think,
Yeah.
being saved without it being tied to works allows you to kind of relax and then have the proper boundaries to allow you to do what you should be doing rather
Yes.
than doing it out
Yeah.
of guilt. So there might be, I don't know,
100%.
well, there's
Yeah.
probably something to that. So I agree anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, and what's interesting is there's a passage in Galatians 5:16 where Paul says, "Keep in step with the Spirit, and then you won't gratify the desires of the flesh." And what's so interesting about that is because he's talking about all these things of the flesh, and he's not saying don't do these things and then you're going to be okay, like resist them, you know what I mean, in that sort of way in this passage. But he's saying basically it's like when you keep your mind kind of focused on for like the gospel, you know what I mean, like keep your mind and keep in step with the Spirit, then you're not going to gratify the desires of the flesh. And that's what I kind of noticed too, because that shame and guilt and all that stuff, once that stuff kind of just went away, that's when I actually had the desire, I mean, the willpower, the ability to be able to stop doing these things that were like controlling me for so long, And so it's super counterintuitive, just like the Trinity is counterintuitive. I think a lot of the fundamental Christian stuff is counterintuitive, which is why people naturally push back. That's why the gospel message is offensive, which Paul talks about in Galatians 5 and 6, because it's super offensive, because that's offensive to think that like somebody lives an awful life like Jeffrey Dahmer could be in heaven because he believed in Christianity, which I've done a video on. But I think God's grace is big enough to
Oh,
save any of us. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty weird, but I don't know. Life is pretty weird. And I mean, we're told that we
Yeah.
can't even, I believe, like, can't even understand what God is like, right? Can't
Yeah.
see it. People are blinded, can't understand it. So
Yeah.
then who are we to
Yeah.
understand the reasoning here?
Yeah. And that was one of the things that helped me believe Christianity was true, because I thought about it. I said, if you're going to make up a religion, why would you make up the Trinity for out of all things, right? You know what I mean? Like you're going to talk about the most counterintuitive thing that you can say to people. You're like, why the Trinity? But I think the gospel message is similar, because every other religion on the planet believes in a salvation based on works. Every single other religion on the planet. And so
Oh, I didn't
yeah,
know
that's why it
that.
bugs me when Christians do that. Oh yeah, they all believe you have to do something and you have to keep doing these things in order to be saved. And Christianity says, no, it's a free gift. Jesus did everything so that way you could be saved. So that's a radically different claim, which is super offensive. And so I understand the offense, but yeah, but I think it's the only thing in some ways that really makes sense. It's the only thing that makes sense in my mind, because if we have to do all these things, then it's like, man, who can say? Like when Jesus gets to the heart, like in Matthew 5, where there's a Sermon on the Mount, he's like, if you looked at a woman with lust, you've committed adultery in your heart, right? And you're like, dang, well, if you even looked at a woman, you're violating the laws. So like all of these rules people try to come up with to say, I know I'm saved because I don't do these things. And I'm like, well, in your heart, you probably do, and you're condemning yourself, And so, yeah, that's why I think it's just such a beautiful and humbling and counterintuitive message. Like it's so bizarre all at the same time.
I love it.